Hello, students, and thank you for selecting this next career interview. I am here with Ron Toelke, who is a graphic designer. So, Ron, if you could just introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about the steps you had to take to get to where you are now.
Well, okay. I've been doing this work for many decades, and I'm in my 70s now, still working pretty steadily. And it's been a very long career path, to say the least. I was in early on, and this is going back to the 1970s, I was in a business where we created artwork for home decor. That lasted a few years. I was doing silkscreen work with my wife at the time. Then I got involved in a graphic design partnership with some family members. That lasted about 5 years. And I learned a lot in that business. Again, this is in the late 70s and early 80s. I learned how to do typography and design in the analog way. And I decided at that point in 1982, I wanted to get into commercial illustration. So I built a portfolio of work. I taught myself how to paint. And I got a representative in the Boston area, a representative to the trade, and they typically bring you the work. They had connections with the advertising agencies and the publishers and that sort of thing. And I worked throughout most of the 80s as an illustrator. Hard work. I was good, but there's a lot of good people out there. And I often say that there were these books that were illustrator references. And when I first started, there was one volume about an inch thick. And when I started to end of the freshman, there were 3 volumes that filled the shelf like that. And then I had a friend from high school, believe it or not, that was running a design and communications firm in Rhinebeck. And we connected after my 20th high school reunion, which is interesting. And we started to work together. They needed a designer, and but it was strictly freelance. And that went pretty well for about 10 years when their business they went bankrupt, which happens. Many businesses fail. And at that point, we decided I'd given up illustration in the early 90s pretty much and went into design. And we bought our first computer in 1991. That tells you anything. And learned a little by little how to manage as the software increased over the years. When we got a Macintosh computer in the mid 90s. And the digital revolution in terms of what we do is nothing short of magic. It radically transformed the efficiency, the immediacy, and nowadays with the internet, the workflow is all over the internet. So there's no more going to printers or sending hard copies or anything like that. So this business, again, with my wife and I, has really prospered really in the last 25 years. We've built a steady client base, and we've gotten more and more into book and publication design, just kind of a specialty. And your students might think, like, who designs books anymore? Well, books are not going away, and there's plenty of opportunities there for people who understand publication design, typography, page layout. It's much more nuanced than that. We do a lot of cultural and historical content, which is a particular interest of mine anyway. So we've really got a pretty nice array of clients, and there's a lot of work in the pipeline. Several books coming up this year. We have a magazine client. We do a quarterly magazine, and it makes a nice little business. We haven't really promoted the business in some years because I've been trying again to step back, but now with our daughter and potentially our son-in-law involved, we just recently rebuilt a new website. Which is up now, and we've already had one contact from that for a project. We've done a lot of local and regional work over the years. We probably have worked with every nonprofit within 100 miles of here, one way or the other, over the years. I mean, work and clients come and go. So that's the long, short answer.
Thank you. So, you mentioned before you work out of your home, and a lot of this is now in the digital age, which really has changed things quite
Completely digital.
completely. Could you walk us through a typical day in your field of work? When you wake up and go to work, what is it that you do?
Well, it depends on what's, we typically have several projects in the works. We just finished a major book, over 456 pages that went to the printer the other day. We have another book that's well in the works on what would I call it? It was an art community in the lower Hudson Valley that flourished in the early part of the 20th century. So that's a substantial book. I'll have another magazine coming up. What else did I work on today? Our older daughter is a makeup artist in New York City, and she's been building some businesses, and I guess who gets to do the work for her? It's Dad. So it's okay. It's fun, and she's patient because sometimes I can't get to it pretty quickly. So basically, when I get up here in the morning around 10 o'clock, I don't put in a very long day anymore, maybe 6 hours, 7 hours. So I'll check my email, which is endless, and then see what's going on. So today, I finished up working with a photographer in the New Paltz area. We're doing a second edition of this book. It's a photography book. She photographs in the Shawangunk Mountains. And from this original edition from 2016, she's expanded it, I think, 32 pages. So she's very hands-on. She was here last week, and she was here yesterday for about 5 hours. And again, working with our daughter too. And so that got sent off today for review. And then I have another book, a local book, with a 92-year-old woman out in California who has written I guess, a psychological memoir with artwork and memories. And we have two friends that are editors over in, well, they're friends first, and they're editors professionally. And our friend Sarah does a lot of editing work for us, which is critical. When somebody writes a book or writes anything, due diligence says you better get it edited for obvious reasons, especially if you're going to publish it. So Sarah often has to take projects like working with a 92-year-old woman to hammer this thing into shape. So it makes sense, you know. So that got done. I worked on that yesterday and today. So I finally got a full 128-page layout for that off today. And again, these are incremental review pieces. Everything goes out as a PDF file. So you can look at the whole 128 pages, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of stuff going on for edits and new content and everything. Part of it is, who drives the process. And we try to be collaborative, but not everybody's got a good idea. And it's our job to say it's not a good idea and why it's not a good idea. And the publishers listen to us, but the sort of self-publishers don't always listen. So it's incumbent on us to drive the process without, again, if you do a book with us, it's your book, but it's our job to make it appropriate, reader-friendly, typographically and visually appropriate for the content, and so on. So that's where a lot of the fun is.
Yeah, because that's a reflection of your work too. So you want to make sure that it's coming through in a light that is approved by you.
Yeah, you can easily get a mediocre job, and that's my opinion. And you can pay more than you would pay us, and that's up to you. We're happy to work with you, but if you work with us, you have to work, by our standards, and listen to us.
Yeah,
we edit a lot of pictures too. Every picture that's in a book, we edit.
Now, this really goes nicely actually into my next question, and that question has to do with the skills that someone may need to be a successful graphic designer. And I think you've touched upon some of those soft skills, especially in terms of collaborating with other human beings, that communication and that teamwork that might need to happen, or problem solving. But what are some of those soft skills or more trainable skills that you feel are most necessary to be a graphic designer?
Well, there's certainly higher education, and maybe even in high school, that introduces, you can go to, I'm sure, an art school that would give you a lot of grounding in, well, first of all, design. You don't need a computer to design. We spend a lot of time, scribbling stuff on paper. Collaborating. Well, what's a good cover design? What do we have to work with? So we'll sit down with a pencil and paper and just like when you do a logo, for example, we have a logo project in the works for a potential business. And so that's a process too, where you listen to them. What are they interested in? Maybe they show you some model logos that they kind of like, what typography, what kind of imagery. And then, we create some initial designs based on that feedback, and hopefully it goes smoothly, but sometimes not so much. You just have to work it until everybody's happy. So so you can certainly get an education in design if you feel like you're a talented, art, if you want to say artistically talented or whatever. And learning the software, Photoshop obviously would be familiar to most kids, where you can do a lot of incredible editing of images. Unfortunately, a lot of the imagery that comes in is either historical or snapshots. Sometimes we get professional photography. So all of that needs to be edited and made uh, as good as possible for reproduction in print. So that's one aspect. And learning Photoshop, is not easy necessarily, but once you get working in it, it's pretty obvious. You just try everything and see what you need to do. Because we work a lot for print, that has its own requirements as opposed to doing like doing like web work, for example, setting up websites, and people do video. There's a lot of crossover in all this. And we work in the Adobe Creative Suite. Adobe kind of owns the territory for this. And the Creative Suite is probably at least 2 dozen apps. They have video apps, editing apps, Photoshop, Lightroom, InDesign, which is the page layout program, Adobe Illustrator, which is the graphic arts design program. And I've been doing this for almost 30 years, so I never took a class. I just learned it along the way, as because I started when it started. Now it's all there, so it may seem like a higher mountain to climb for somebody who's 18 or 19 or 20 to go, oh, I don't even know where to begin. So we were able to learn it along the way, and we transitioned from the analog to the digital, which also is kind of helpful because there was a lot of the digital is based on the old way of doing things. I mean, typography is typography. But what's point size? What's leading? All that comes from the printing press. When they set type, out of metal type. So all of that, it's hard to say. You need to know it all, and you need to learn it. But you can do a lot. You can do a lot without knowing every little thing. And I've been mentored a lot over the years. People have taught me things that have been very valuable and have improved my ability to create a really good product. And I should add people skills.
Hmm.
When you have clients, you need to be able to work with them and not be a jerk or say my way or the highway, because you'll be out on the highway.
Right. Won't make any money doing that.
No, no. I know. I should say that my older daughter, who's a professional makeup artist, she does film and TV in New York City. And she's often put into if she works on a new TV show, it's all new people. And you have to play well with others, be professional, and do your job to the best of your ability. I mean, anybody in the creative fields would have to have the same people skills. Nobody wants to work with a jerk
Right,
or
right,
a pain.
right.
So that's important.
Ron, could you tell me what you love most about your job? And then in addition to that, maybe what's the biggest challenge in your job?
Well, I would say I've been self-employed my entire life. My last job ended in 1973. So for a good or bad or indifferent, I've enjoyed a self-employed lifestyle. So I can dress the way I want pretty much, unless I'm going out to see somebody. But when I'm in the studio, depending on the time of the year, in the summer I have shorts and a t-shirt. In the winter I might have a little waistcoat and a sweater or whatever. So I can walk over to the house. It's a 10-second walk. And if I feel like taking a nap in the afternoon, I'll do that, or it just depends on how busy I am. So I treasure the lifestyle. And I can't tell you that what monetary value I would put on that, but I'm very well adapted to it. And especially when I was illustrating, that's a very solitary profession. When you're commissioned to create a piece of art, it's on you. And if it takes you a week or 3 days, that's you. And nobody's coming to say, "Oh, how you doing?" or anything like that. It's all on you. So it's not for everybody. You have to be comfortable working on your own. You have to be comfortable making decisions on your own. Experience teaches you a lot of that, of course, along the way. And it's probably a profession. Again, here I am at 73 years old. I mean, a lot of our friends are retired, 10 years, and I still like it. I like the work. I don't like being responsible for the work so much anymore. But
That
It's a great way to make a living. I mean, we've done over the years done very, very well. I mean, I don't need to work. We have
Hmm.
more than enough to live on and retire on. And actually, with our younger daughter, we're pushing a lot of the income over to her.
Hmm.
So it's nice to be able to be in that position too.
Yeah, and I think it's important for kids to hear that version of the story and being a graphic designer who's self-employed, because it sounds like really that number one thing might be just your self-motivation. Do you have the internal drive to complete these projects in that timely manner with the quality that's required to continue to work for yourself and
That's
build a
exactly right.
reputation?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
had to learn self-discipline. And when I was in my 20s, I was not so. Let's say I was lazier.
Yeah.
But you learn that along the way because you need to. And once I felt professional, and that took some time too, because again, I didn't come out with a degree in graphic design or photography or something like that. I have a liberal arts degree, from 50 years ago. So nobody asked me about my college education, and on our website we have all that information if you want to know. But it's kind of irrelevant, at least for me.
Right. It's about the quality of the work that you produce and
Yes,
what the client is looking for.
and we always function as a business, not as a freelance person. So we're business to business, even though it's just my wife and I. We've always been that way, and she's done a lot of production work over the years because we're not so busy. She doesn't have to be involved anymore, but she runs the business. And I think it's important to have, if it works out for you, a partner, especially a spouse or a significant other that is in the same or is willing to work. My wife Barbara has a degree in a master's in special education, but she hasn't taught in the classroom since 1977. And after our kids were in school in 1991, our 40th birthday, we decided to get a computer. I said, would you learn it? Because I didn't know anything about a computer. And she did. And until the last couple of years, she's been very heavily involved in the workflow. So it's a good two-person way to operate if you have that opportunity. A lot of people would say, "How can you work together all day long?" Not a problem.
Yeah, you must like each other. That's a good thing.
Well, we've been married over 40 years. I guess we do.
Yes. Another question for you, and understandably, this question really probably has a variety of different answers for
Yeah.
any given graphic designer. But in terms of salary ranges for a career such as this, and whether or not there's opportunities for advancement in terms of salary and position.
Well, I mean, again, I have no experience in that. I've never worked for a company. I've never been an employee of a design firm or an ad agency or anything like that. I've worked with them as, an illustrator or a designer, but none of our work is in the advertising field anymore. And we don't do web work. We don't do any video or anything like that. Those are all kind of specialties that you need a whole other skill set for, technically, as well as just understanding the internet and social media. We don't do any social media or anything like that. We don't need to. If I was 35, it'd be a very different story. So uh, just rephrase that question again.
Yeah, just wondering what the salary ranges are for a
Oh
graphic
yeah, well,
designer.
I mean, there were years, and of course, the value of money changes, but there were years that we would gross, 150, $160,000, but we worked hard. And the nice thing about the work we do is that there's very little overhead. In other words, when we bill $3,000, we're not shelling out $1,000 on overhead or supplies or materials or anything like that. It's all in the computer.
Right.
So the money that you generate is pretty much all yours. Now, so the thing is too is that when we get an opportunity for a project, I'll write a proposal and I'll find out the parameters of the job. Let's say you have a book and you have an 80,000 word manuscript and you have 100 pictures. Well, I can quantify that to a degree in terms of the size of the book and the number of pages and everything, and create a proposal. Let's say it's $2,500 to $3,500, and we usually bill a third of that to begin with. So there's always money up front, and we don't send out the finished product until we get paid. So we've rarely had any problems getting paid, which is nice. As far as the salary goes, I honestly have no idea. I'm sure you could start out I don't know, 30, 40, 50,000. I have no idea,
All
honestly.
right. That's okay. It's all right because it's important, I think, just to hear your individual experience as well, because there might be kids here thinking that they do want to, go off and start their own business. So I think it's important to know that probably the salary ranges are limitless on either end, the low end and the high end. It depends
Yeah,
on the work that
yeah, and
you put in.
it's because we've been doing this so long, you kind of get pricing baked in, And I realized
Right.
I used to have a game company too. For 20 years, we had a company called Chatham Hill Games. We did a lot of interpretive games for museums. We had a lot of inventory. The 2008 recession calamity kind of killed the business model, and we were kind of aging out anyway, so we closed it up and so on and so forth. But we had done a project for a company down in Westchester. It was called American. Crap, I'm not going to remember now. But they put out an African American history magazine, and they wanted to do a game, quite like a question and answer game on African American history. So we did that project back in 2008, and they have since changed their business model. And they had this is going back before the pandemic now, that they had an opportunity to work with the National Hockey League on black players in hockey. Now I'm not a sports fan. This is like I have no idea. But I went and looked at the value of the dollar in 2008 as opposed to 2019, and it was 20%. So
Wow.
if I charged $10,000 in 2008, I'd have to charge 12,000 now. In fact, I went back to another client on a book project, a field guide to Columbia County, which has been my proposal was from 2019, and the dollar is almost worth 10% less. So I came back to them and said, "Hey, I need another $1,100 or whatever it was based on the original budget."
Right.
So managing the financial side of a business like ours is very important.
Sure.
You don't want to be too high. You want to be fair. You need to be fair to yourself. You need to be fair to the people you work with, but you got to make a realistic amount of money. I mean, if somebody says, "Oh, I can do that for $500," I say, "Go for it."
Right. Well, Ron, I want to thank you for your time. We
Sure.
appreciate you volunteering your time to talk about your career to students who might be interested in pursuing something in graphic design. I think that this is, shed some light on what to expect and certainly what to expect if they were to run their own business in a field such as this. So we truly appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, very strong on having your own business.